Why are young people becoming radical? More and more young men around the world are voting for post-fascist, extremely radical parties on both ends of the political spectrum. It's a phenomenon that's sweeping across nations, leaving us to wonder what's fueling this drastic shift. In these times of extremes, we need a program that upholds anti-authoritarian, anti-fascist, and fundamentally sane ideas, the concept of a radical center. I want to amplify the voice of reason, the voice of the center that is so often overlooked and seen as bland by many. But the center is wise, thoughtful, and measured. It seeks solutions without resorting to the extremity. The center is a beacon of hope, searching for balance amidst chaos. Today's column digs deep into the growing affection for right-wing parties among young people. Why do they make such extreme choices? What's driving them down this path? We ask ourselves, how and why do people become radicalized? Disenchanted with the politics of common sense, they often crave nothing but raw emotion. They turn to whoever provides a clear, black and white narrative, a decisive voice that points out enemies and allies, offering some semblance of direction in a confusing world. But it's not just one reason. There are many. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "God is dead." This powerful statement underscores the demise of traditional religion, and with it, the old order, the norms and principles that used to guide human life. People once lived in small, tight-knit communities under the same religion, knowing what was right and wrong because the church told them so. But Nietzsche already declared in the 19th century that God is dead, and so religion no longer dictates our moral compasses. We're free, reliant on our minds to forge our paths. Nietzsche's concept of the Superman, someone wise enough to create and follow their values despite the collapse of old norms, is quite illuminating. Yet not everyone is capable of being that Superman. Many struggle to live by principles without external guidance, so they seek support elsewhere. With the decline of traditional religion, people turn to ideologies for direction. Some cling to right-wing ideologies, longing for the return to old-fashioned values and principles. They argue for preserving hierarchies from the past, while others dive into the progressive whirlpool, advocating for radical change and revolution. Left or right, extremes allure many with their simplicity and certainty. But I remain an advocate for the center because it acknowledges the complexity of our world. It offers a middle path, steering clear of the deceptive simplicity of radical ideologies. They say the world is divided into believers and non-believers, into us and them, into whites and non-whites. Leftist ideology divides us into the exploited and the exploiters, into classes where one oppresses the other. I despise collective responsibility. I loathe being pigeonholed into a class. I crave the right to stand apart from both extremes. Can't we find a middle ground? Can't we belong to a group without being labeled by ideology? In today's world, you don't have to be cold or hot. If you're lukewarm, as the old religious principle warns, you'll be spat out. This is perilous. This sheds light on a significant issue. If people need principles and can't find them in religion, where do they turn? Maybe they don't need them at all. If certain religious principles functioned for a time, they were likely needed. When they stop functioning, there are only two possibilities. Religion might be like the Taliban, a relic of the past we no longer need and can discard. Many believe that, or religion and its principles might be like a thumb, something essential, without which life is difficult. People need these principles to navigate the world. Why? Because there are two types of freedom. Negative freedom from the vast ocean on which you can sail, and positive freedom to the ability to set a direction and goal. We're adept at creating negative freedom, quickly and efficiently. Freedom from religious prohibitions, norms, and tyranny. It seems fine until the vast space of choice opens up and people get lost. With 1,000 options, choosing one feels like losing the remaining 999. This is a serious problem, especially for young people, particularly young men. In this realm of negative freedom, they struggle to choose and need guidance. With old rules gone, new rules and ideologies emerge. Both right-wing and left-wing ideologies appear. The right-wing ideology is more tempting for young men, often bringing serious side effects. It simplifies the world through hatred. If you know who to hate, you know who to love. Right-wing populists often tell you what to do, providing a sense of help. For young people, this guidance is appealing. They receive messages on how to think about the world, feeling less lost. But who is their guide? This guide can lead them to dangerous places for the state, society, and others. For example, the cult of strength. Notice how attractive this is to young men. The right-wing approach is militarized, aiming for efficiency to cope with the world. There's also a lot of fear. In this situation, philosophy is no longer needed. They need an Alexander the Great to cut the knot, not untie it. This is dangerous. It accustoms young people to solving problems by force, not discussion. They feel compelled to help others solve problems by force. The symbol of this approach is the person who doesn't talk but snatches the microphone, silencing others. He is strong, decisive, and instead of being condemned, he is glorified. These are very dangerous situations, and we must consider their origins. They stem not only from the collapse of old orders and the invasion of new ones, but from a void, a normative void, a space without rules, hierarchy, or norms. Pay attention. Many people talk about how, in the past, societies had initiation rites for young men. A young Indian, for example, might be thrown into the middle of a forest, sometimes naked, with just a knife, and told to return to the settlement. If he returned, it meant he had managed and was a man. If he didn't return, he wasn't fit. It was brutal, but it marked the moment when a young man had to say, "Okay, I am an adult. I have to get on with my life." Some joke that nowadays, initiation means a mother saying to her son, "Sir Simek, you're already 36 years old. You have to move out." This is the moment when a man, not so young anymore, realizes what is happening to him and that something has to be done. The risk associated with this whole situation is enormous. As I said, all over the world, we are observing a tendency in which young people, especially young men, are moving towards the right, towards the fascism of public life. By this, I mainly mean the lack of deliberation, the lack of conversation, replacing it with force, solving problems by force, which is extremely dangerous, and admiration for this force. This is often the admiration of weak people who cannot cope with the world on their own. In connection with this, they admire those who, in their opinion, are precisely the agents. And now the question arises, what should we do about it? Should we throw up our hands and say, no, this old world is over and the new one has not yet begun? Maybe we should give these ideologies a chance. Unfortunately, both ideologies, right-wing and left-wing, have brought very negative effects in the 20th century. In connection with this, maybe we should return to certain old principles. Maybe not in the format of religion, because religion has become compromised. God died because religion died, and the church compromised itself with scandals, pedophilia, and other issues, showing a duplicity that can no longer be overcome. People will probably never return to this way of thinking, but perhaps some old principles that governed our lives, that told us how to make choices, make sense, as exemplified by old stories and the great books of monotheistic religions. Even if institutional religion is no longer acceptable to us, it can serve as a kind of direction. They allow us to reflect on certain issues, precisely how to live, whether to live boldly, confront evil, or hide from it. These are the kinds of things that are very difficult to come up with on your own. we discover that tradition is wiser than individual life. In some way, it is like a collection of wisdom from generations past. Wisdom collected over the centuries is passed down in stories by people who also live their lives, sometimes for 30, 40, 50, or 60 years. But sometimes we throw away what is good in tradition and blindly follow what is new. For example, we believe that a good way to make moral decisions is to follow our intuition and emotions. But all the teachings of old traditions show that this is not the right way. I draw attention to this because in this void we are dealing with, because the old principles have fallen, it seems that something has to fill it. Instead of wise principles and norms that are open to man and based on closeness and solidarity, we are dealing with norms proposed by ideologies. Ideologies simplify reality, are often based on hatred, are black and white, and divide people into enemies and friends. This is precisely what causes polarization. Ideologies are so popular because they deceptively organize the world. A young person, a young man, who doesn't have these old rules and norms, wants to know how to act. Then suddenly, someone comes and says, look, these are good, these are bad, these you have to love, these you have to hate, and everything becomes easier. The whole situation becomes easier. This is why young people, especially men, are moving towards the right. First fear, then chaos, then the collapse of old values and their replacement with new ones, which are often simplified, not based on respect for man or his dignity, but on snatching the microphone, on beating, on destroying something. This is a vision that is an illusion of norms, an illusion of order, but that is why it is so attractive. So people, on the one hand, have given up on old values because God is dead, but they choose new ones, even more dangerous because they simplify and destroy. Remember, Nietzsche predicted the turmoil of the 20th century. He foresaw the rise of great ideologies that claimed they could forge new values, but would ultimately lead to destruction. And indeed, we witnessed the calamities brought about by the great Nazi ideology and the great communist ideology. Both were rooted in dangerous oversimplifications. You are good, you are bad, you must be loved, you must be hated, killed, or burned. They sorted people into rigid categories: Aryans and non-Aryans, kulaks and workers, the discriminators and the discriminated. These simplistic divisions, though appealing for the illusion of order they provided, were extraordinarily perilous. These ideologies wreaked havoc, yet their popularity persists precisely because they offer a deceptive sense of clarity. But we must question, how can we coax people to converse rather than kill each other, to dialogue instead of resorting to violence? How can we teach the values of negotiation and understanding rather than the false bravado of uncompromising strength? True strength lies in the ability to converse and negotiate, a rare quality in today's young. Unfortunately, many are drawn to the siren call of decisive, strong action, even when it is ill-proportioned. A wisely governed state would act with appropriate measures, not shooting mosquitoes with cannons.